Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our learning session today, Reduce Your AP Burden, introducing the no-touch invoice. Before I introduce our speakers, we're really excited to show what we've got for you today. Some of our customers are saying that they're kind of taking this time to evaluate their current processes and just see if they can find some additional opportunities to gain more efficiency as we kind of come back into market recovery. So we are really excited to show you a couple things today that can help you do that. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. Well, actually, first I have a couple of housekeeping things. One thing is we will open up for questions at the end. So there's a questions panel in your GoToWebinar console. As we're going through the presentation, if you think of a question, please feel free to type it in there and we'll have some time to take those at the end. And then everybody who's attending the session today will receive an email with the replay link to the session so that you can review it later, or if you want to share it with a colleague, feel free to do so. Now I'll introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Dave Savell. He's our General Manager for Field Ticket Operations. Dave is a 33-year veteran of the oil and gas technology industry. He had a number of roles in technology development and operations, including support, sales management, marketing, and development. In 2000, Dave left Halliburton and co-founded Digital Oilfield, running U.S. operations from its inception, and was on hand for the first deployments of Open Invoice. And then our second speaker is Don Hofer. He's our Solutions Director for the Business Automation segment. Don supports the sales channel as well as the technical interface between our customers and the Business Automation Product Development Organization. He has more than 29 years working in the oil and gas industry and has held various positions, including technical support and managing Landmark Graphics North America Support Center, before managing the drilling technical sales team. In 2004, he joined Digital Oilfield, which was the company that developed Open Invoice. And now, guys, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Susie. David Savell here. So going through the webinar, we'll have a quick safety moment. We'll look at the current digital oil field and essentially the how we can potentially leverage digital technology to streamline, in particular, digital field ticketing. And we'll talk in particular about how we can, through automation, really reduce manual touch points and have a better understanding of our spend. And Don Hofer will actually take you through what that looks like within our applications. And then, as Susie mentioned, we'll actually have a Q&A session at the end. So first, because this is an operations-based system, I'd like to start off with a safety moment. And this one is one of the great things about having global roles within oil and gas is that at some points I get to see some pretty interesting things. Now, I didn't take this picture, but I certainly could have. I've seen lots of things like this. You have a situation here where a basic engineering principle was actually violated. So essentially, the moment around a fulcrum hadn't been exceeded. So therefore, there was an issue. So you think, wouldn't it be great if this person, this driver, had some software technology to be able to properly load balance so he wouldn't actually have this issue? And you would think so, and that sounds great. However, that's not necessarily so. I actually did take this picture. It's an air freight company. This is on the tarmac at Dubai. And what they'd done, they'd taken some load balancing software and they had basically mixed up the units. So rather than tracking or entering feet and pounds into the software system, they had meters and kilos. And as a result, you had the incident which actually happened here. So even having technology doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get this type of a result. So really the safety moment here is that don't rely on technology by itself. Understand how the technology should work. And if you are a technology provider, make sure that you do everything that you can to make it as evident as possible what should be done and how it should be done. And within Enverus, we try to live to that standard related to our technology and software. So what is Open Ticket? We look at have a quick look at a workflow on the right-hand side here, a very simplistic workflow. But basically what OpenTicket is a cloud-based collaborative platform for operators and service providers to generate, review, and approve field tickets. So this workflow on the right, you see the essentially where an operator needs good or service out at a rig site, they'll ask a service provider to provide that. The service provider dispatches those resources, the work is done, a field ticket is generated, it's approved by the operator. The service provider then takes that approved field ticket, creates an invoice, and in turn rolls it into the whole invoice process, and ultimately the supplier gets paid. So when you look at something like OpenTicket, what digital field ticketing does is basically manage that process. So the whole creation of a digital field ticket and approval of that ticket takes place in that blue rectangle, which is OpenTicket. And those of you that work with the Open Invoice application will recognize that the green rectangle is in turn the digital representation of invoice creation and invoice processing. So when you look at it, you can see how closely OpenTicket and Open Invoice tie with each other. And as part of Don's presentation, he'll show you how the digital impact, the impact of the digital field ticket on the actual digital invoice and how that process is really accelerated and enhanced. So look at innovation in oil and gas document processing. And for those of you who have been in the industry since before the 2000s, you'll recognize this from the standpoint of the life cycle of an invoice and field ticket, actually. It was all on paper. So the generation of the field ticket, generation of the invoice, the coding, routing of the invoice, verification of the field ticket, validating the pricing, all of that was all handled via paper. Very time intensive, very labor intensive. And as a result, there was an inordinate amount of time taken for it. Very rarely did you typically turn around an invoice within contract terms. So as of the 2000s, digital invoicing started to really hit the market. And by 2010, Open Invoice was an established standard within North American oil and gas operations. And what we managed to do was digitize the whole concept of generating an invoice, also making digital the workflow around code routing the invoice, verifying pricing, invoice approval, and loading to the ERP on the operator side. But you still have these paper field tickets. So where we see the opportunity moving forward is how do we eliminate those tickets? And we've done that through the implementation of OpenTicket. So the challenges with paper tickets as they are now is that you have safety issues. Suppliers spend time on the road tracking down company men for ticket approvals. Challenges around processing time. And this is really one of the challenges with the field ticket, especially on the operator side. They have to reference scanned PDFs of paper tickets in order to validate the scope and quantity and even potentially pricing related to the work that was done with that field ticket invoice combination. So there's just an interruption in that overall workflow. From an analytics standpoint, paper field tickets, you really can't analyze that data. And there's a rich quantity of data within a digital field ticket. You can get details down to the O-ring related to what's gone on a given work site. Fourth is lack of visibility. So operations can wait days or even weeks before getting accurate information related to not only what happened, but also what the estimated cost was. And this is particularly true of unmanned work, so LOE and production work. Coming up with accurate accruals is really challenged through the whole paper ticket world. Then finally, risk of fraud. And this was a bit of an eye-opener for us, but unintentional and even intentional overbilling is hard to detect through paper tickets for high volume, low dollar services. So this is particularly true when things got really busy during the shale boom, where there's a tremendous amount of work done, a tremendous amount of paper generated, and frankly, no one was looking too hard at that huge stack of paper. So there was some intentional overbilling going on within the industry. And of course, we have the big challenge of how on earth do you get this whole piece of paper through this whole process? And there's a lot of touch points where there can be errors, there can be issues. And so from a paper invoice standpoint, there's a lot of challenges related to that. So everyone gains from OpenTicket. When you finally do make the ticket digital, there's an upside for D&C operations. So again, there's a little bit of a safety element related to unnecessary travel, but also we can have digital field ticketing feeding morning reports. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. There are different ways that we can do that. We support rentals with an open ticket, so it gives you more accurate cost management and ultimately leads to better operator-supplier relationships. But there is a different value proposition from the operation side for LOE or production operations. Really, the safety component around eliminating unnecessary travel is actually larger there, because it is a very common practice that suppliers will try to track down a company man with 50 or 100 field tickets that are actually part of a stack associated with that week's work. And so if we can get rid of that windshield time, if we can cut down on driving, essentially there's a fundamental component that actually helps with safety. It accelerates cost and operations understanding. As we talked about it, we've got far more accurate accruals. And we have this concept called the virtual company man, where essentially the supplier becomes an extension of your operations group within the oil and gas company. So you find out information related to your unmanned, unsupervised work virtually the instant that it actually happens, or certainly the instant that it's tracked within the digital ticket. So you've got a far better handle on what's actually going on. And ultimately it does lead again to better operator-supplier relationships. And on the business process side, you can basically streamline the overall invoice field ticket validation process. The fraud detection, we've actually talked about that, being able to actually look at some of the digital elements associated with the field ticket and figure out, what on earth can we actually do associated with this overbilling. And you can dispute tickets, you can actually contact a supplier, rationalize whatever issues that you have going on. So yeah, overall, it's there's a lot of opportunity to streamline that business, and really a big thing is reduce the requirement of the knowledge workers, especially, to spend time and energy looking at tickets. So your senior drilling engineers, senior production engineers, senior managers no longer have to spend a lot of time and energy, again, pulling up a PDF, comparing it to an invoice, and figuring out what actually makes sense. Then finally, your service providers ultimately get paid faster. So what we can do now that we have this combination of open invoice and open ticket, we can make the entire process digital. So we can generate the invoice, generate and get approval for the field ticket digitally, code route the invoice, verify the pricing, approve the invoice, load it to the ERP, and approve that digital field ticket, all within a digital workflow. So what that means is that you can literally have automatic approvals between scope, quantity, and price if they've all been validated by the solution in terms of contract pricing, and scope and quality and quantity have been validated by a field supervisor that is trusted. What this means is that we can automatically approve an invoice when it shows up. The invoice will certainly still be there, but we can automatically deal with it. And again, Don, as part of his demonstration, will show you that in detail and how that actually happens. So in summary, why open ticket? We talked about the safety. We essentially minimize travel. Processing time, we can automate compliance. From an analytics standpoint, all ticket information becomes analyzable data. From an availability standpoint, you have a far better handle now. Essentially, your suppliers are giving you information as if they were an extension of your current operations group. And then finally, for fraud, unintentional overbilling is easily detected and prevented. So how do we do this? How do we create what we term touch invoice with auto approval? Well, essentially what it does is reduces the burden on approvers and AP by really getting rid of the manual touch points. But there are certain things that have to happen. So the coding of the ticket and the invoice is populated from the corresponding price book line, because one of the challenges within the workflow process is ensuring accurate coding. Secondly, the incoming invoice is under a certain value, so you can put a limit depending on what your organization is comfortable with. The incoming invoice matches the approved field tickets for scope, quantity, coding. The pricing for the items invoice match the approved pricing and price book. And the field ticket approver has an authorization limit greater than the value of the field ticket or a combination of field tickets. So if all this happens, then the coding on the field ticket carries through to the approved invoice, creating a no-touch invoice. So that's the concept that we're talking about, related to taking an end-to-end workflow and essentially approving an invoice without, frankly, even touching it. What's interesting is that we can also go out to the morning reporting systems and potentially make them part of the auto approval chain. And this is really key, once more, because if the field supervisors, especially in the drilling and completions world, need to be part of this process, then what you can do is you can tie into the morning reporting system and essentially ensure that they're not doing double work. So if you have a ticket that has been provided by a supplier before the morning report is sent, it's very straightforward to export the information out of OpenTicket and import it into, say, WellView or Open Wells by a well supervisor. So that's straightforward. However, what we're finding is that in many cases, for whatever reason, the digital field ticket is not provided at the rig site. It's provided after the fact. And the problem is, of course, is that the drilling supervisor has to get that cost estimate based on the paper field ticket into the morning reporting system before 6 a.m. the next day. So what we've come up with, and again, this will be part of the demonstration, is we can now match information between the morning report and a generated field ticket. So basically what can happen is that if everything matches, if the supplier, the coding, the cost, the date, the AFE number match between the WellView record in WellView's case and the ticket in OpenTicket, it'll automatically approve that ticket. We also know that sometimes, maybe it won't match exactly. It'll be off by a dollar amount. It might be off by a given date. So we've actually developed a system where, rather than actually automatically approving that, it gives a field user the opportunity to physically match a WellView record with an incoming ticket and then approve that ticket. So what you see here is that you can have it both ways. You can have it if you're getting the tickets in a timely manner, you can have those tickets feed the morning reporting system. If you don't, you can have the morning reporting system be part of the automatic approval process and actually approve that field ticket based on information entered within the morning reporting system. So how are operators already using no-touch invoices to be more efficient? We do have two case studies. One with the Discovery, and they were looking at reducing the number of touch points for the AP department and approvers. And they've implemented auto approvals workflow in the open ticket price book and open invoice for low value invoices like water haul. And they've estimated they've automated 40% of its invoice volume and a weekly time savings of 30 to 50 hours with no touch invoices. And that's fundamentally an FTE. And so that's actually quite a healthy improvement from the business automation side. For the Permian operator, actually larger operator, due to downsizing in resources, they really had to spend a lot of effort trying to figure out, okay, how do we rationalize the administrative tasks? How do we actually make all that happen? And again, they've managed to completely automate their process through populating the purchase category coding in the price book, and in turn auto-populating the coding in both the field ticket and the invoice. So they've taken that whole coding element, that whole manual coding check, essentially, if that line item that you've chosen out of your price book matches the purchase category within the price book, all the coding automatically rolls down to the invoice and field ticket process. So 50% of their invoices under the current effort are totally automated. 70% are actually partially automated. There's still work that they're doing, and we are actively working with them to figure out, okay, how do we make that 100%? So field approvers basically only need to validate scope and quantity, and if those match what are on the invoice and the pricing aligns, then the invoice is automatically approved. So OpenTicket is getting more and more traction. Again, well over 60 operators are using OpenTicket. We're active in virtually every basin in North America, with the exception of California. And you can see the type of operator really runs the gamut from big multinationals down to relatively small organizations. So OpenTicket is a very scalable solution, and it can work for really any upstream oil and gas company, or even midstream for that matter. And from a usage standpoint, over the past 12 months, and actually some of this is actually driven by social distancing and the ability that you have with OpenTicket to ensure that there is social distancing maintained between supplier personnel and operator personnel. But over the past 12 months, we've processed close to 2.5 million field tickets, close to 7 billion in spend. And we just found out last week that these numbers are as of the end of September, but we have passed 5,000 suppliers that are on the OpenTicket network. So we're starting to really gain traction from the standpoint of the relative size of the ticket network. It is getting very significant, and I think if you're operating in any one of those areas, which I actually showed previously, if you're not on OpenTicket, you'd find that a majority of your suppliers or close to it are currently transacting on OpenTicket with another operating company. So with that, I'll pass it over to Don Hofer, and Don's going to take you through some of the things which I've talked about here.
Thanks, Dave. I'm just setting up, and I'm going to set up my screen to display here. All right, so you should be seeing my open invoice screen. Is that correct, Dave?
Not yet, Don.
I can see it, Don.
Okay. Thank you. Whew. Started to panic. So thank you, Dave, for that great overview and the whole way the solution works. And what I would like to do is really get into how all this is set up in a walkthrough example from start to finish of a supplier submitting a ticket, show the full automation all the way through, after the invoice is submitted, what happens to it. And then come back and go through, kind of the WellView integration or the more reporting integration. So to begin with, and apologize if this gets a little bit too administrative or down into the techie side, but I would like to really boil it down and show you really what is done and the pieces to put in so that you could have that no-touch invoice and have all the controls in place to make sure that what's happening is actually what you're paying for. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my price books, and this user that I'm logged in on the open invoice side as an operator in my test Permian E&P company is an admin user, so I don't have to keep logging in and logging out. But I'm going to come in here, I'm going to select this 2020 agreement for this oilfield services supplier and show you the first thing that has to happen is you have to basically categorize, or a lot of people are categorizing their price book line items with the purchase category. So if I pull up this roustabout services, you can see that I have a purchase category of labor, and then I have an item master. And item master is something that you can further define that item by. So you could have your purchase categories, which are more broader, and then you could really go down to an item master, which could be like an inventory ID or something that's further defining what that labor charge is. So I have this 23. So that's how I've defined this roustabout service. And so now if I go into actually the purchase category coding setup screen, I can see that labor 23, purchase category item master 23, will code to the major minor combination of 023 302. So what that's going to do is if I go into and select this line item roustabout services that's been mapped to this labor purchase category, it'll automatically code that major minor to my ticket or invoice. So that's really standardization on the coding elements, as well as putting that coding on there so someone doesn't manually have to do that work. So just a little bit of the setup there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and log out and log in as that oilfield services supplier and create a ticket. And really test my login ability to remember passwords, so that's good. So this is the supplier side of the application. For those of you on the operator side, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but they get a whole dashboard of what's going on with their invoices, unapproved and approved, and disputes, and their price books that they have with their customers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to create a ticket through the portal. And those of you using OpenTicket know there's several ways to enter tickets into the system. This is the most basic way, which is manually logging into the system. I can be on a cell phone, iPad or laptop, and just as long as I have an internet connection and a browser to put this ticket in. Obviously, we support any third-party ticketing system a supplier already has. We just integrate it with our APIs, or they can post it through an import. So we support lots of different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and put ticket number in there. This is one of the added controls that we have if you move to digital tickets, is now the ticket number has to be unique. So just like the invoice and open invoice has to be unique, the ticket number also has to be unique. It's what side I'm in. I'm going to invoice that ticket, that Permian E&P company, and I'm going to do a labor equipment material ticket. So we do support multiple ticket types, and whichever ticket type is like a template. What data is required for that type of ticket? So I'm going to choose this labor because it's a roustabout service ticket. Come in, it's highlighted red. I have to put a service date in. So I'm going to put it was yesterday. Selects my price book. I'm going to put who ordered the work. Who ordered me to come out there and do this work? It was me actually on the operator side. Put a description. Then you can put the actual crew members in there. So I'm going to put a couple of crew members in here that helped work on this job. So I'm going to add him, and I'm going to add George, Tuck Springer. So you can tell I'm an Astros fan. These are Astro players. Truck number 30, and next. So this is where some of the automation comes in, is once I hit that line item, I'm going to put the type of services. So I'm going to put that I work from 6 to 1,500 hours. And I'm going to choose roustabout services. Since there is a price book on it, automatically put my rate in there. So then I just have to put my hours in there. 5 plus the 6, make sure I put the right hours in there. 7 hours. Charge type is labor. Yeah, put my AFE in there. I can search for it by lease name, or if it was given to me when the services were called out. But automatically notice that it populated the major minor. And that's because I chose that line off the price book that was coded to that purchase category coding. So therefore, those major minor codes are automatically populated. That's the first part of the automation. So once I hit submit, I get this line item on my ticket. It's got the green price book alert. That means what I've agreed upon with this Permian E&P company for the $200 an hour is what I'm charging on this ticket. So it automatically flags it green that this is correct pricing. And so if I tried to charge $210, it would change it to red, and $190, it changes to blue. So we're flagging if the pricing is actually accurate. I can add any type of attachments that need to back up this ticket, or I can just go ahead and submit it over for approval. So now I've submitted that, so I can see all my statuses from the supplier, kind of from the AR side. What tickets have I submitted that haven't been approved? Which ones have been approved? Do I have any saved tickets, and do I have any disputed tickets? So that's a big thing with digital ticketing, is now the operator, if there's something wrong with the ticket, can dispute it, and you can correct it and resubmit it back. And so you can collaborate via the platform on the tickets, not just the invoices. So get all the issues fixed on the ticket before the invoice even gets created. Saves a lot of time on both sides of this system. I log in as my ticket approver and approve that ticket. All right, so if I come into my ticket stack, so me as a requisitioner, I see that ticket here up on top. So that 9/16/2020. I come down here, I can see it's fully compliant with my price book. I got the green flag, and it's fully coded. So that coding came from the purchase category coding, and the AFE and cost centers that the supplier provided. I could go ahead and update that coding, or go ahead and just approve it. So really what this is allowing those ticket approvers to do is really just look at the scope and quantity. Was this roustabout crew actually out in the field doing what they were supposed to be doing for 11 hours? and I think they did do the job, and so I'm going to go ahead and approve that ticket. So that's really it. So I go ahead and approve it. So it took me to my next ticket in my stack. So the next part of the workflow is the supplier got that notification that that ticket was approved, and so they're ready to invoice for it. So I'm going to go in back as a supplier and invoice that ticket. Okay, so I'm logged back into the supplier, so they can take that approved ticket and invoice it just by going to invoice tickets, and I can just search for that ticket number, or I can give me all submitted tickets for that operator and create multiple tickets on the invoice. But for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and do the one. So there's my ticket. It's been approved. So I'm just collect it and I hit invoice. It's just going to take that invoice, that ticket data. It's going to create that invoice for me. And so I have to put where I'm actually submitting the invoice. I give it an invoice number, which has to be unique. So I just use the same thing. And I give it its description. And since they flipped that ticket and invoice, it takes that electronic ticket and adds it to this ticket section. So this is a link. This ticket number is a link to the actual electronic ticket. If I wanted to see it again, I can see it was approved. So a lot of our operators have where that you cannot invoice them with an unapproved ticket. So that means no one signed the ticket. So that approved is basically taking the place of someone actually signing a paper ticket. I can see the amount of the ticket without opening up any images, and I can see who approved it. So I can see a name. Actually, this is the user's name that logged in. It's no longer just a signature. It's an actual name, so I can go back and see who at the operator actually approved this ticket. You can put some additional information in if you need to help routing. Then I come down to the invoice line, and I see that there's a green ticket alert. And what that's telling me is that this invoice line that was created from the ticket matches identically to that ticket line that was approved. So that 11 hours at $200 an hour for that time frame was exactly what was approved by that field approver. So that's if I go in and try to change this invoice line, such as changes to 12 hours or changes the rate, it's going to flag it to red. So the system's going to validate this ticket line actually matches this invoice line. So it's doing that control for you. And then again, we have our price book alert. So the $200 an hour is the contracted rate that I have for my roustabout services. So I click next and submit to buyer. So I submitted that over to the Permian EMP. So this is the last time I'm logging out and logging back in, I promise. I'm logging back in as my operator. So I'm logging back in as the Permian EMP user, and I'm gonna go to my dashboard. And I'm gonna search for that particular invoice I just submitted. If you look at the journal, it's showing you that the invoice is submitted. It was code verified by the system. So the coding was added onto the ticket by the purchase category coding, and it's valid coding. It was on there. And so what this does is come across and the system just validates the coding that was submitted on that invoice from the ticket. And it meets all my validation rules, so the system code validates it. It's then again ahead and forwarded to the ticket approver, which is me. I have enough financial authority, so the invoice automatically approved. So it checked a number of different things. One was, is the coding valid that was placed onto the ticket? It should be because it came from the purchase category. Two is, does the ticket lines actually match the invoice lines? So is the ticket alert green? Is the price match? Does the price match my pricing agreement? And the green price alert tells you that it does match it. And does the user that approved this actually have financial authority to approve this invoice? And so it checks the DOA. So you can set up all those different types of controls in order to set up this no-touch invoice to ensure that you're just not passing this invoice through the system that no one's actually looked at. Okay. So that's basically, it's ready for payment now. You can pay upon payment terms. So no one on the invoice side, no AP staff, no invoice approver actually approved it because the scope and quantity was validated and everything else was validated by the system. Next thing I'm going to do is go back to my tickets and talk about the more reporting integration. So that's the next step, is let's try to eliminate even more duplicate effort administrative tasks, which is someone having to put data into a morning reporting system and also approve electronic tickets. So how can we do that? Actually? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for a particular supplier submitted. Argus Trucking and search. So here's all my Argus Trucking tickets. So the first thing I can do is, let's just say I went ahead and I want to approve all these, so I can go ahead and approve them all. And I haven't put this data into my morning reporting system. So the first thing that Dave said is I could just select these reports, all these tickets after I approved them, and exported it right to, in my case, I have WellView XML set up. So I could export those out to a file, log into WellView, and there'll be an import from OpenTicket menu option if that's set up, and you just import this data in. The next part, which is probably more used today, is what we're hearing is basically the tickets aren't submitted electronically at the time of service. Therefore, I'm entering that data into WellView, and that WellView data is coming back into OpenTicket to be matched against the tickets being submitted. So if I select one of these tickets, so if everything matches, the ticket number, the date, the amount, the supplier, the AFE, all that data, and as an operator, you control which components of this data you want to match the WellView record. You can have it set up to automatically approve, or if I know that I have entered this data into WellView and this ticket gets submitted, like I'm going to select this bottom one here, I can hit the WellView reconciliation. It brings up a table of, here's my ticket on the left-hand side, here's my WellView data. And as you can see, this particular ticket for an amount of 180 could match up to this $539 one. And if it is the right data, I could link these two together. Obviously, I don't want to do this one because it's not the right amount, but if I pick the right ticket and submit it over, it would link these together. And so you can build some matching routines that says, as long as I'm within a certain dollar amount, as long as I'm within a certain date range, and it meets all these other criteria, you know, the supplier number, the AFE, et cetera, then go ahead and match it up. So save that person from putting the data in WellView and approving in OpenTicket, have it automatically approved. And I think, Dave, that's all we wanted to cover on the invoice or the ticket side, right? So I went through the whole automation phase, WellView side. So I think right now we're going to turn it over to Jeff White, who's going to talk about a little bit about how we can help if you need help with this type of service. So I'm going to pull up your.
All right, thanks, Don. Great demo, and just want to touch base on a couple things real quick. Earlier, Dave talked about some of the customer success stories that have experienced some of the zero-touch invoice process that we just spoke about and that Don just demoed. And when we're talking about the two of those organizations, the first one was a Permian operator, and this Permian operator had been utilizing Open Invoice and OpenTicket for quite some time, and they had a lot of knowledge and experience, and they also had the resources that were available to really go in and evaluate their process. So they went through and they actually started working internally to implement a zero-touch invoice process within their organization. They reached out to us a few times and asked for some thoughts and questions, but for the most part, they were able to handle all that internally. But the other example that Dave provided was from Discovery Natural Resources, and what they did is they wanted to grow their OpenTicket program and eventually use the morning reporting integration. What they realized is once they started getting into this, they really lacked some of the in-house resources necessary to complete that implementation. And so what they did is they reached out to the professional services team and asked for some assistance. And so we went in there, we worked side by side with Discovery. We helped them implement the proper processes that were in place and make sure everything was set up accurately. and train different resources on how to better utilize the tool. And ultimately what they were able to do is to get a significant number of invoices going through the system automatically with zero touch process. And so the reason we mention this is that we really want you and your organization to be successful with the zero touch invoice process. And if this information looks fine to you and you understand it and you're willing to roll it out within your organization, then hey, more power to you. We'll be here to support you if you need that help. But if you don't have the resource availability or the resource expertise, that's where we can step in and come in and assist your organization. So Dave, if you can go to the next slide. One thing that our professional services team is able to do is there's a lot of different services that we are able to provide. And the one that we really kind of focused on today is focused around the compliance enforcement. And we can really help you ensure that you've got your price book set up accurately, that you've got open ticket working accurately, you have the right business rules in place, and that's all working it together. Or if there's something else that your organization needs assistance with, we have several clients that we're working with on price book automation, on helping to increase their spend against price books, and how to reduce some of their out of compliance invoices. And so these are just some of the services that this team offers. And if you have any interest in any of these services, just reach out to your account directors and let them know. And what we'll be happy to do is we'll provide you a complimentary business review, and we'll come out and look at how your system is set up and make recommendations. And then at that point in time, you can decide if you want to do all of these tasks in-house, or if you'd like to leverage our resources. So I just want to throw that out there. If anybody has any questions, be happy to answer any questions you may have. So with that, Dave, I'm going to turn it back over to you, or Susie, or do we have questions?
So Dave, could you switch to the next slide, please? Perfect. Okay, so before we start taking questions, guys, I just want to put a couple of resources. As Jess said, and on all the open ticket information that Dawn and Dave shared with you, if you want more information about open ticket and how this can drive more process improvement for your organization, please reach out to your account director, as well as the professional services team if you'd like to know a little bit more about how they can help you. If you're currently somebody that's just checking out some of the business automation solutions for the first time, and this is kind of new, and you want to know more, you can email businessdevelopment@enverus.com, or you can actually go to our website. It's oildex.com, and we have lots of great information about open ticket and other complementary business automation solutions. So I just want to put this up here, and now we can open it up for questions. And I see I do have a couple. So guys, feel free to type those questions in. Our first question is open ticket included in an open invoice subscription for the supplier, or is it an additional cost?
Yeah, there's no additional cost to the supplier. So suppliers can transact through there's a ticket portal that we can that suppliers can actually transact through. What we're finding is that there are some suppliers that have their own digital ticketing systems that can integrate with open ticket. In that case, we actually provide an API, and on a case-by-case basis, we can figure out what's involved in actually connecting them up. But we have a number of suppliers that have gone through that route. But basically, we commit that any supplier can enter a field ticket at no charge through the open ticket portal.
What solutions are involved to get this automation to work?
That's really a combination of the technology that Don showed today. Fundamentally, open invoice, price book, and open ticket, because you do need essentially price book for certainly pricing validation. And if you want to make it as sophisticated as what Don showed, with the procurement category being able to actually automatically code the field ticket, then you can actually use that component. But basically, it is price book, open ticket, and open invoice.
Next question is, so the example that Don showed was a non-purchase order. Are we able to use purchase orders with the ticket?
Yeah, so I can take that on. Yes, I use the price spec example, but the same functionality, if you use purchase orders, can be done. So you could take the purchase order, create a ticket from it. And if your purchase order lines have coding, obviously the coding will be populated on the ticket as well. Same way the purchase category coding worked.
Okay, perfect. So what kind of controls do you have in place, or what kind of controls are other operators using to make sure that these auto approvals are actually accurate?
Right. That's a great question. I get that all the time when I'm doing demos, is like, I don't, the organization I'm demoing says, no, I don't think we will ever get to the no touch because of all of our controls in place. And hopefully I illustrated as I went through there, if you have price book, open invoice, and open ticket, or purchase orders, you can put those controls where the system is doing a lot of validation that you have a human doing today. And are they really doing it? The system is actually validating that as I showed you, the pricing from a price book actually matches the ticket and the invoice. The ticket line that was approved in the field, so what the field approver approved from scope and quantity, actually matches the invoice. The coding matches my validation rules, and you can drive that from purchase orders or purchase categories. And then the financial approval can be controlled as well, as if that person that approved the ticket actually has DOA approval, you can have it approve the invoice based on his DOA approval or her DOA approval as well. So all your controls around, does the invoice match my contract? Does the invoice, was it someone signed the work was done? And does someone have enough financial authority to approve that invoice? Can all be done through those controls that the system is validating.
Perfect. So we have another question about purchase orders. Will it match against, I guess this is, will the ticket match against the purchase order receipt or the actual purchase order lines?
So we can do either way. So basically, the ticket, if you're using electronic tickets, you typically use that as the receipt, and you wouldn't populate another receipt in your system to match against. So we do have the goods receipt module that if you're doing POs for materials and you want to send over the good receipt, which is not the digital tickets, then you're matching the goods receipt to the PO line to the invoice. Versus what we're kind of showing you on the ticket is that ticket becomes this receipt, and as the PO matches the ticket, which matches your invoice, is your throughway match. So hopefully I didn't confuse you, but you're not really matching against the receipt of the PO. That is the receipt of the PO, is the ticket.
Perfect. Will the support attached to the ticket be included with the invoice export?
Yes, it will. So any attachments attached will come over on the export. And that's good savings for people, because they don't have to keep reattaching the supporting document. Once they attach it to the ticket, it automatically flows to the invoice, which then flows to the export.
Perfect. What is the level of adoption and success with submitting ticket info to WellView at this point? Is there automation integration available with this? And can the coding of the ticket be validated against WellView coding to ensure the resulting invoice will agree with the WellView entry?
Yes. So two questions there. The first question is, where are we with actually practically using the application from the standpoint of the export and import? Sort of that first example that Don showed. We've had that in production now for some time. It's had relatively limited use, and quite honestly, the reason is because that second workflow process, kind of the after the fact WellView reconciliation, is the one which honestly there's more need for. So we've been developing that, and actually we had our first successful trial of it with one of our customers. We're implementing the technology that we've developed into production, and we hope to have that in production ready to go. If not by the end of September, then the next what we call sprint afterwards. So by mid-October, that portion should be in production. As far as the coding, and this is interesting, and we've had conversations back and forth on this, and varying opinions, is that what coding is accurate. Is it that which is on the field ticket that might have even come out of the purchase category, out of the price book, or is it the coding that the field supervisor put into WellView? And we'll likely make it essentially a binary choice. You can choose one or the other. But to start with, if you say that they have to match, we'll simply fail the invoice if they don't match. If further down the road, we're looking at if the coding on WellView is the preferred coding and it does match the field ticket, but everything else does, what we can do is we can give the user the opportunity to approve that ticket and have the WellView coding move on to the field ticket coding.
Thanks, Dave. Next question, how does the ticket dispute process work? Are you able to unlock an approved ticket to dispute back to the supplier?
Yeah, so I can take that on. The ticket works a little bit different than the invoice. It doesn't have to be disputed actually for the supplier to make changes and update. So until the ticket is approved, a supplier can automatically see that they need to make changes and move on. And once the ticket is approved, the operator does have that choice to unapprove it and dispute it back as long as it hasn't been invoiced already. So once it gets onto an approved invoice, they can no longer unapprove it. But if it's still in the workflow, and they can unapprove it and dispute it.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Oh, wait, I have one more here. So can you give an example, like what the average number of days we'd wait before having visibility into our LOE costs with OpenTicket versus without it?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. We've actually wrote a case study on that topic with Anadarko in West Texas, and they were finding that their accruals were actually far more accurate once OpenTicket had been deployed. Their estimate was that they reduced the accrual error rate by 80%, and anecdotally, they felt that the digital tickets were coming in 1 to 2 weeks ahead of the paper tickets. And that's why they were able to actually have far more accurate accruals.
Another question, are you able to tie the tickets together, example, the water hauling and water disposal to match the volumes?
We are capturing the tickets. They'd be separate tickets, one from the disposal and one for the hauling. And by best practices, companies are having the suppliers and the disposal company put the data in such so that we can run reports and validate that today. But that is part of what we're working on, is actually automating the checking of volumes between the two tickets to ensure that they match and alert you if they don't.
All right. Well, it looks like we are coming close to the end of the hour, so I think we should probably wrap up this learning session. But guys, thanks so much for joining us today. And as we mentioned, please reach out to your account director or to our business development team at the contact information below. And thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day.